is Ashley MacDonald. Ashley is an instructor in the Business and Social Sciences Department at Dalhousie's Faculty of Agriculture. She has a background in agricultural business and economics, and Ashley wears many hats at Del AC. She's a graduate student, a teaching assistant, a tutor, part-time academic, and a campus writing advisor. So she's done lots of things during her time at Dal. And her research area is in agricultural business and has a particular interest in sustainability and data-driven decision making. So welcome, Ashley.
This is your... Good morning, folks. In my roles at the AC, have gotten used to being allowed to just talk at people for 80 minutes at a time. So I have notes so that I don't yap that long. Just to add on to like my little intro, I am from Colchester County. The photo I have up here is from my grandfather's field. We were up picking in the area that he did not spray pesticide. So that's why there's some other things growing. I tried to see if I could find the photo from when I was a kid, and I was hand raking for half what everyone else was getting paid, but couldn't find that photo. There's also a photo somewhere of the summer that I was on the back of the harvester, but I wouldn't have shown you that photo even if I could find it because my brother was driving and it did not go well. No one was happy at the end of the day. So I am going to try and complement Patrick's presentation a bit when talking about the opportunities within the margin. But I want to give a disclaimer that my level of expertise and knowledge about what would work on your fields and in your farm are limited to how many times we've spoken before this. Every individual grower is just as unique as every individual field. So I have some ideas. I have some suggestions on things that I think would be helpful in terms of considering our margins and what potential opportunities we might have to improve on those. But not everything's going to work for you. Take what you need, leave what you don't, and please provide me with any feedback afterwards. Kind feedback, of course. The purpose of my session today is going to be identifying a few low-risk opportunities that might provide some relief in those narrow margins that we will often be faced with. And as I said, you know your farms and your fields better than anyone else. So I'm not going to waste any time kind of telling you about the industry. You're more than aware of what's going on. So I want to try and encourage us to frame the types of decisions that we're making and identifying what is still within our control. And making sure that we are looking at realistic, low-risk opportunities that will kind of suit your needs. An analogy that I will use is we're thinking about small hinges on doors that swing wide. So small adjustments that we can make consistently and have long-term meaningful improvements. We're not looking for like a big sudden win. We're looking for small incremental changes that we can make to improve our efficiencies and the margins overall. So we know that this is a price taker commodity. So we need to be really mindful about how we're allocating our time, energy, equipment, and the land itself. So we want to make sure that everything is grounded in the reality of the day-to-day as well as the seasonal changes that we're experiencing. We want to try and identify ideas that don't require big upfront costs, because probably don't have the big upfront capital to be able to put at risk. And we want to be able to test these on a small scale. We don't want to have a big commitment that we can't easily walk away from if things don't go well, which is really important when we're thinking about exploring these opportunities. We want to be able to find things that we can walk away from if they don't work. Yeah, so really keeping an eye on what is a realistic fit for your farm operation. So when I talk about margins, it is as simple as what's left over after we pay all of our costs. And we can typically improve these margins through efficiencies and diversification. It can be the difference between moving forward, treading water, or kind of starting to slip backwards and eroding any potential gains that you might have made in years past. So most of these opportunities are going to lie in those small spaces that we might be overlooking. Margins don't improve because margins will improve when we're making small, steady, practical adjustments from year to year or cycle to cycle. As Patrick stated, yield is always going to be that kind of first step that you're going to be wanting to look at, but yield doesn't necessarily always translate directly to profitability. So we're also wanting to make sure we're using our inputs efficiently and effectively on our fields and not shrinking our margin by inefficient use. So I'm going to kind of talk more about returns than yields moving forward. So, as I've been saying, these margins are through small, intentional, smart decision making, and trying to identify where we can best use our time and resources. To echo again, this is going to come from, do we have a good understanding of where our time is going, how we are using our inputs, and that is going to require us to look back at our records and be intentional about those records when we are kind of collecting them. I was at a session and we were having a conversation about this overwhelming amount of data, and we are data rich but decision poor. So it's about how do we actually transform that data into something that we can use to make a decision. There's no point in keeping track of things if you're never going to look at them again. If it's just going to go into the filing cabinet, and then when the filing cabinet's full, you'll throw it away, don't bother writing it down. That's not an efficient use of your time. So instead, focus on what information you are likely to use and prioritize that. So when I was working on putting this presentation together, I tried to think about where are the primary opportunities that we would typically be discussing like in those margins. So targeted cost improvements, improving our costs is always going to be a great way to increase that margin, particularly when we are in a price taker commodity. And I don't want to repeat everything that was just said. So, protecting your margins, particularly in difficult years or in your buy year, is going to require you to be more intentional about managing those costs and keeping track of what is going in versus what is going out. The next two, I think there's probably some ideas in the next two that I'll lose some of you on, and that's okay. At least when I was explaining my presentation to my dad last night, there's a couple ideas that I definitely lost him on. And that's fine. I was trying to be creative and think out of the box on some of them. And if anything, you can tell me why I'm wrong. That should be fun. So capturing more of the value chain. Typically when I am talking about, try and capture more of the value chain, people assume I'm talking about vertical integration and owning more of the value chain. But there are ways to make take advantage of some small opportunities to kind of own more of your margin. Just to have even just a slightly better return. And then the complementary enterprises is about how to use the land in more than just the one way. And again, these are where the ideas get very optional. And what might work for one field is likely not going to work for another field. But I don't know. I think some of them are fun. I think it's a fun idea. Okay, so targeted cost improvements. So improving our efficiencies in a way that doesn't require a lot of new investment. So sometimes in my classes, I'll talk about the technological treadmill that we can often be in agriculture, where in order to stay competitive, there's that constant investment in new tech and new gear. And I don't see Travis in the room, but no shade. But it's in terms of thinking about what do I actually need and what's going to get me that return on investment now versus return on investment long term. And what kind of suits your goals of your operation. So just because there's something new doesn't mean we have to buy what's new. And then focusing on our best fields and prioritizing the fields that are profitable and giving us those better returns in terms of how we are using our inputs first. So allocating our resources according to the improved returns. And reducing the inputs in those lower performing areas. So the photo that I had on the cover, it's near, it's at the front of the field where the camp is and where the road is, and it's really rocky. So we never bothered clearing it and leveling it so that it could be run through the harvester. We rake and we hand pick, and that's where we invite people to come up and pick berries. And because it wasn't worth us doing the development of that small patch just to take the tractor through it. So yeah, and then in addition to our kind of targeted cost improvements, improving your timing, reducing the number of passes. If there are preventative measures that you can take in the off season to ensure that there are no potential breakdowns, or you're doing all of your maintenance well ahead of time so that you don't have to run out and chase down a new tire for your equipment, which 3 years ago, we lost a week because we couldn't find the inner tube for whatever it was. I don't know why we had to go to Moncton for it, but we did. It's also it's a good idea to do the per field profitability checks to see what is actually a worth, if the field's even worth your effort. Or what areas of the field are worth your effort. I won't go into the how and that. So our operational efficiencies, so that pre-season maintenance, standardizing instructions is one that I'll often talk about. So having a standard operating procedure, especially if you're bringing in new staff or temporary staff, so you aren't losing time to those miscommunications and having to do kind of that rework piece. So having those standardized instructions and taking a bit of time at the start to do that training and ensure there's clarity for all members, just to kind of save that operator labor later. If you can improve your routing and kind of, again, go back to avoiding those multiple passes, that also is a way to improve some efficiencies in that small scale. Again, these aren't going to be huge changes that you're going to see in your returns, right? But they're just small little things that can make an impact once we add them all together. So capturing more of the value chain. This oftentimes sounds bigger than it actually needs to be. We don't necessarily have to do some high investment capacity building. It can be, small incremental changes. Maybe you are selling some hand-picked blueberries at a local market, or you're taking and building some sort of value-added partnership or processing with a local business. And with the capturing of the value chain, it's intended to be designed around what is reasonable and what opportunities would work for the nature of your crop and the way that you want to run your operation. It's not changing your entire business model. It's, is there a way that I could do this one little thing that might have allow me to have a bit more of that profit margin? When we're talking about value chains, these sort of graphics of what is a value chain can get very complicated, but for the most part, it is the relationship between going from inputs down to the end consumer. And around the sides of that are the kind of services and advisors that help to support the decision making in the industry itself. So the supply chain is about the movement. The value chain is about who is earning what. And typically in a traditional value chain at each stage, so as we move from input suppliers to farmers, there is a markup, a price markup where there is going to be some profit margin. And when it goes from farmers to processors, there's that profit margin and moving forward through that. So when we talk about capturing more of the value chain, it's a matter of, can I try and get a little bit more favorable return through grabbing a bit more of the processing or the packaging. So I have a very basic example of holding back some of your product to process, freeze yourself, and test out with a local retailer or a local bakery, or something small where they will see some benefit from being able to say this came from a small local producer and it was directly processed or sold through that direct channel rather than through a large processor packager. Regardless of whether you take this idea, trial this or any of the others, it's important to consider that this is running as a pilot, not as a long-term strategy. So you're testing this out, seeing if I do this on a small scale, is there demand? Can I find customers? Can I find partners? How much labor does it take? Is it a worthwhile return on that labor? Do I actually make any more money as a result of this? What is that kind of cost benefit return relationship? And this doesn't have to be, a big spreadsheet endeavor. It can just be, on the back of a napkin tracking what was the result, what was the outcome. The next is also leveraging opportunities to collaborate and sharing resources and working together to get better access to the market and potentially improve those margins through a kind of collective bargaining approach. And this allows you to partner instead of build, because the building that capacity internally is going to require that high initial investment typically. But if you can instead partner with people or businesses that already have the sort of equipment that you might need, the space, or even the customer base, when we're talking about doing that kind of direct to consumer sales model, the most challenging part, the most time-consuming and expensive part for a lot of producers that are exploring this model is actually identifying and retaining the customers rather than the processing packaging piece. So if you can tap into someone else's infrastructure or resources, that can avoid some of the headache that you don't necessarily need or want. And it allows you to focus on what you do best rather than trying to build new capacity. When you focus on starting something very small and finding someone who does the part that you don't want to do, that will allow you both to still benefit. The kind of partnership model can be a great way to kind of a great stepping stone towards something bigger in the more long term. The last piece are the complementary enterprises. So these are essentially ways that you can find gentle, low impact alternative uses for the land and finding some secondary purpose. This is when I was discussing this section with my father last night, and I was like, oh, well, you can also do glamping. I don't know if anyone is familiar with the concept of glamping, but people are putting like yurts on like middle of nowhere properties and renting them out as like luxury glamping accommodations. And so I was pitching that idea to my father, and he's like, oh, well, I was planning to take the old horse trailer up and put that up as a campsite. I think there's a bit of a difference between our old rusted out horse trailer that he's putting a bed in versus the glamping experience, but someone might be willing to go up to Eastville Mountain and stay in an old horse trailer. That might be the vibe. I don't know. It'd make for an interesting photo. Um, but alternative optional land use strategies, if you are willing to allow folks on your land and you have the capacity to do so, that might be an opportunity. I also argued with him that I don't know how he even thinks he's getting the horse trailer up because the road is not fit for most vehicles, let alone a very old horse trailer. But hey, he's got a plan, and I hope it goes well. You pick. Finding those kind of hard to harvest patches or areas that are going to be low profitability for you, but potentially an opportunity to invite people to come out and hand pick or rake, and you can charge them by the pound. A lot of people love going, especially during fall colors, to go for photography sessions. Or I have some friends that work in film and TV, and they pay quite a bit of money to rent land space, very unique land spaces to do filming. So that is a revenue path that doesn't impact your harvest cycle and is relatively low risk, low cost. Research leases, offering for other complementary enterprises that might have dual benefit to your operation as well. But the goal with this category is to figure out what is something that has low effort, low risk, fits within the nature of the land already, and is using parts of the land that aren't generating strong returns or aren't generating returns in that buy year. So are there low effort ways to earn a little bit more from the land? And you already have the land, you have the scenery, you have the access, and you might have some level of infrastructure on that land as well. So how can you leverage that to potentially make those existing assets work a little bit harder for you? Whether we are testing out these complementary enterprises or the partnerships, it's important to take the time to test out those options and do one at a time. Don't go full send and, make a bunch of changes all at once, because then you're not going to be able to actually measure the effect of those changes and evaluate the effect of those changes. So the goal is to pilot an idea and test it out and see how it works. Try a small area, test out for 1 weekend or 2 weekends at a time. Do 1 or 2 bookings if you're doing the glamping or the photography idea. But when we are testing that out, we want to be mindful of how much effort is this actually taking? What did I actually gain from doing this test? And would I be willing to do it again? Because, hey, it might go well, but you're just like, actually, it was kind of like not really fun, don't really want to do it, not interested in trying again. Don't keep going. Just because it worked doesn't mean you have to commit to it. Because that's all about evaluating these different opportunities. So we're looking at that risk benefit and how well that fits with what you are wanting to do and how much time you're wanting to put into things. Whether it's a cost improvement or grabbing more of that value chain, It's important to make sure we are evaluating and reevaluating consistently. When we think about the decision-making process, it's intended to be a circle. Every time we make a decision, we need to be kind of going through the evaluation of the alternatives, doing that information assessment, and then going back and reconsidering whether that decision was worthwhile or what's the next decision that needs to be made. So some basic questions that we would be thinking about when it comes to risk and potential benefit. What does it cost me in time, labor, and money? What do I potentially gain from it? Am I going to increase my revenue? Does it allow me to lower my costs? Or does it allow me to gain something from the land that I wasn't gaining previously? And is there something else that I could test on a small scale instead of this? That allows us to kind of compare the different options that we have on the table. If we, some other things that we would want to think about is, does it fit with my workflow or the rhythm of the season, or is it going to disrupt that? If we are really set in our ways and how we like things to kind of go during the season, don't disrupt it. You've built some efficiencies, even if we don't measure those, you have already established some efficiencies with that. So don't mess with it if you don't have to. Will it add extra stress, or will it actually allow some pressure to be relieved? If it doesn't work, can I easily walk away? And even if everything looks good on paper in terms of the impact that it has on the business, it's okay to set it aside if there's something else that doesn't align or doesn't feel like a good fit. When it comes to evaluating the alternatives, the goal is to stay in control. And we don't want to be chasing big ideas unless we know that we are able to get the best return with the least amount of risk. If you are willing to bear a lot of risk, obviously go for it. But typically when we're looking at commodity groups with small margins and with volatility in those uncontrollable factors like the weather and the pricing, we are oftentimes advising around minimizing or mitigating the impact of the risk. Let me think, I'm probably going over time. So you can do the quantitative evaluations of these, potential options and look at estimating your costs associated with it and doing a very simple break-even analysis to figure out if it's going to generate a profit at the end of the day. We also want to consider the qualitative evaluation. So that is looking at that your existing workflow, what are the downsides, and what sort of impact will it have on your stress. And then I just have some examples of some kind of ways that we would measure, kind of like shortcuts to measuring these different opportunities in a mixed method. So we might use an opportunity scorecard where we are ranking our decision factors through 1 to 5. And based on the results, we can use that kind of as a benchmark for determining if we want to move forward or not. We would also maybe do a pilot workflow to see what does it actually look like in terms of the day-to-day or the week-to-week, or like sometimes we also call it like an operational work plan. But to help us evaluate how it would actually, improve or disrupt things, and see if there's a way to, before even testing it out and piloting it, is there a way to find a better approach to keep what works and drop what doesn't work. So pulling everything together, when we are thinking about trying to find opportunities in the margins, we want to see if we can find those small refinements, those little improvements that can help us find just little bits of efficiency. We're not looking for big dramatic changes. We're wanting small controlled decisions in the areas that we still have control in. So that might be tightening up the timings that we have, or finding a way to just make our workflow just slightly, just a little bit smoother. Building partnerships rather than infrastructure or big new investments, sharing some of those costs. and finding those low effort ways to generate additional revenue. The goal is to choose one low risk idea at a time, pilot it in a small way, and that way it still leaves you room to pivot if it doesn't work out. Yeah, thank you. That's what I got. I'll be around if you want to chat. I didn't really think about how to close, so thank you. If if there are questions, happy to take them, but it's also very similar to my classes if there are no questions, so that's okay too. Awesome. Thank you.